So normally I talk a lot about technique on this channel. Today I want to give you 5 simple ways that you can improve your scores, not without any work, but some really easy, simple things that you need to be doing. So the first thing is, if you're not already, use a video delay app. Cannot recommend this highly enough. I've spoken to a lot of people who say, oh, it's too difficult, taking a video on my phone, taking the time to do that in practice, setting it up, and then every shot, checking, reviewing the video, going back, pressing record, it's a pain. So use a video delay app. You can just put it on a tripod, use a clamp. I'll put the link in the description below to the video delay app that I use and the clamp that I use as well on my tripod. But you can set that up, put it at an angle, set the delay anywhere between 1 to I think 120 seconds. So you've got really a lot of flexibility. Use that and then you can review each shot and see what you're working on. So that's number 1, is using a video delay app. Number 2 is adjusting your practice ratio. So what do I mean by this? When you're shooting or practicing, a lot of people will either do only target face work. So a lot of people might, always be shooting at a target face. Even if they're not scoring, they're always shooting at the target face, trying to work on stuff. And then some other people might really be trying to work on technique and only be doing close range blank bail. Each has its merits, but you always need both. If you're working on your technique and you're only doing blank bail, you're not going to get better at scoring. You will get better at your technique, so over time your grouping will improve obviously, but you still need to maintain that element of scoring, the aiming, incorporating that into your shot cycle. So make sure you have the right ratio for what you're doing. If you're in a technique phase, then you should be doing more blank boss than the scoring. So maybe, for example, you might be doing 60 or 70% blank bail and then 30% target face. So you're doing most of your work on the blank bail, working on your technique, using the video delay app like I mentioned, and then occasionally you would go and do a scored round, test what you've been working on, see how it's working, evaluate, and then rework on that. That's a great way to do it. If you're approaching the end of maybe the indoor technical season and then you're going to go outdoors, then you might start flipping that ratio. So instead of going from 70% blank, 30% target, you might slowly start modifying that. So then the target face goes up and then the blank goes down. So then you might end up doing like 70% target face and maybe 30% blank bail. But even in a competition season, even in the middle of the season, you've got competitions every weekend, that kind of thing, you still need to maintain the blank bail work, because it can be really easy to go competition at the weekend, work on some stuff, especially if it's windy, have that competition, and then through the week practice again, and you'll slowly start losing the feel for what you've been working on. And especially if you've worked on a big change recently in your technique, and then you go fully into competition mode only on a target face with no refresh period when you're shooting blank bail, then this can really easily happen. So always maintain both. I'd recommend also in your practice sessions, even wherever you are in the year, having both in your practice sessions in kind of a sandwich. So regardless of what I'm doing, I would always start with close blank boss warm up and finish with close blank boss warm up as the warm down, as the name suggests. You warm up with the blank boss, you warm down with the blank boss. It's the same as in other sports. You would obviously do your warm up and your cool down, that kind of thing. Really important to do that. The third thing, and this is the one that requires the most work, is practice more. And this might sound a bit flippant and you might be thinking, well, that's great to say, but okay, how do I practice more? The thing is, you can practice more without doing more with your bow. So a lot of people might be saying, okay, I can't really shoot more with my bow because it's quite difficult, I'm not strong enough yet. If I do loads more arrows with my bow, probably going to get injured, and that's quite a common thing. But that doesn't mean you can't practice more with draw-ups with a light bow, band draw-ups, drills, that kind of thing. All these are incredibly useful. The fact of it with archery is you need lots and lots and lots of repetitions. There is no shortcut for that, as much as you might want it. There is no shortcut for the amount of repetitions. And just to put that into perspective, some people would say, okay, how is it fair that, say if I start shooting again right now, I would probably be able to score at a reasonable level, even though I haven't shot for a long time. How is that fair? The reason is, I calculated recently, I think I've done over like 1 million arrows that I've shot. 1 million. So, and that's not even the highest by any means of, the top archers in the world. There's people who would shoot maybe even 2, 3, 4 million arrows so far in their careers. That amount of learning in that number of arrows is just so high that you then learn what to do. So if you're struggling with your arrow numbers, or even if you're doing a normal kind of 100 arrows a day, 4 or 5 days a week kind of thing, which is quite a lot for a lot of people, if you're doing that, that's great. But it's really easy to supplement that with 100 light bow draw-ups every day, because they're light bow draw-ups. They don't take a lot of physical effort, so you won't get too tired, you won't have a high risk of injury, and then also they don't take a lot of time, because you can do 50 or 100 light bow draw-ups easily in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, focusing on what you need to focus on with your alignment, your shot cycle, that kind of thing. Really, really valuable. So I can't recommend that enough. Practice more, but do it cleverly. So pretty much all of my Online Archery Academy content is completely free, from my website to these YouTube videos, to my blog, to my social media posts, to my email list. But if you want to support my Online Archery Academy work and then also get exclusive extra content, you can go to patreon.com/Online Archery Academy and get exclusive patron-only content. Last week I reviewed Kim Woo-jin's technique, and this is a video I think a lot of you are going to love, and that's on there as well. Or if you want to look at my online courses, you can go to courses.onlinearcheryacademy.com, and there's every single thing you need to know about recurve archery laid out in a step-by-step way. There's a beginner's course and an advanced course. So if you think you'd like either of those, make sure to check them out. And I want to say a big thank you to my patrons who are already supporting the channel. Now back to the video. So number 4 is make sure you maintain your equipment, and specifically your arrows. I can't explain the amount of times that I've seen people that work so hard on their technique, so hard on strength and conditioning, they do all the training, they do all the preparation, and they do a scored round or a competition with arrows that are fletched poorly, they have tears in the fletches, they have nocks that have been shot for months and months and months, or they have little cracks in the nocks, nicks in the nocks. That sounds weird, nicks in the nocks. That kind of thing is just throwing away points. Your arrows are the most important part of your equipment, because you need every single arrow to be as close to the other arrows as possible. Even if you've got a great bow, world-class everything is perfect, but you've got a bad set of arrows, you're going to score terrible. Arrows are the most important part, and fletching, nocks and points are so important. So now I just want to run through a couple of things to make sure with that. So when it comes to the fletches, have a look at these 2 arrows here. If you think these are fine to shoot in a competition, there's my point proven. Even the one that doesn't have tears, so there's one that has a tear, and then there's one that's just a bit crumpled. Even the one that's just a little bit crumpled, no tears, you might think, okay, that's fine to shoot in a competition. No, you're throwing away points, and basically you just need your fletches perfect. No marks at all, no bends, no creases, no tears, nothing. And they need to be exactly the same on every single arrow. I cannot stress this enough. So fletches, super important. The second thing, nocks. If you have a nock that has any mark at all, or has been hit ever, replace it. Simple as that. I'd even go so far as to say, I used to, before a competition, and this is what I would still do now as well, 2 days before a competition, I would put entirely new nocks on all the arrows. So a fresh set of nocks. The reason I did that is because I was shooting a lot, and the nocks wear over time just because they're obviously made of plastic, and you do need to replace them. But if you're not shooting as much as a professional archer was, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to maybe replace every nock before a competition, and it can be kind of expensive obviously. So you just look through your nocks, and any dinks or anything at all, then you replace them. Key thing to look out for here is the ear of the nock. Sometimes you can have an arrow that hits the ear of the nock, the rest looks absolutely fine, and then there's just a little dent in the ear of the nock. But when that happens, what you can't see is that the ear, the 2 clips of the nock, can now be a different width. That is effectively going to change the tightness of the nock on the string as it clips on, and that's going to change the tune of the arrow, change where it goes on the target. So ideally completely new nocks. If you're not replacing them before each competition, I think the nock manufacturers will like me in this video. If you're not replacing them before a competition, then at least check through every single one and make sure that there's no marks, nothing at all. That being said, if you shoot pin knocks, so you have that metal pin, if you shoot a knock off and the pin appears absolutely fine, still replace the pin. So I've seen some people will shoot a pin knock off, the pin is damaged, they'll file away the pin and then put a new knock on. No. Even if the pin looks perfect, replace the pin because they'll be bent more than likely. So again, might sound super OCD with this, but at the end of the day, this is going to have the biggest impact on your scoring in terms of your equipment. Really important to get that right. As an example, in this clip here, you can see that one ear of the knock is absolutely perfect, and then the other ear, this is what I was mentioning just now, has a tiny mark, and this is where an arrow has hit the ear of the knock, bounced off and then gone into the target, or something else maybe has even hit the back of the knock. But the fact is that knock is now damaged. You don't know whether the ears are the same width anymore or the same stiffness, so you need to replace that knock. Anything like that, any cracks, literally anything, replace the knock. And I know it's expensive, but you've spent so long doing your training, doing all that effort in practice, that you need to take care of your arrows. So now, the easiest and simplest way to improve your scores in competition, make sure your sight is centered. I think 95% of people I see are losing points because their group is not in the middle of the target. I can't stress this hard enough. If your group center is not in the middle, you are just literally hemorrhaging points. You're just throwing them away. And after so much hard work and practice and doing all the things right in training, it's just really silly to do that. So the first thing here that you need to know is exactly how much you need to move your sight to get an arrow from A to B. So what I mean by this is, if I ask you now, how many clicks does it take to get your arrow from the middle of the blue to the spider? Do you know that number? How many clicks is that? So if you're watching this and you don't know, then you need to find out. The same goes for the height. If you're going from high blue in the middle to the spider, how many clicks is that? You need to know that. There is a number, and it is different for different people because of arrow speed, because of the sight they're using, because of all these different factors, but it's super simple to do. You go to your distance that you're shooting, you center your sight so your group is on the middle, and if you feel like, okay, I'm not as accurate as I need to be to do this, you just need to shoot more arrows, plot them, and eventually when your group is centered in the middle, that is where you are. So then, assuming you've got your group centered, then you move your sight a lot. So ideally getting your group center at least to the blue, maybe even to the black, that kind of thing. Once you've got your group center there, you know how many clicks, make sure you count this, how many clicks it took to go from the gold to that place. And then you simply divide that number of clicks by the number of rings that you've moved. And now you have your clicks per ring. So then by the end of this, you'll know, for example, that I think from my point of view, I haven't done this in a long time, I haven't shot for ages, but I think it was 20 clicks per ring. So to put that in perspective, if I shoot a right 10 on the line, I need to put 20 clicks on my sight to move that arrow from the right 10 line into the spider. This should put it in perspective for you. I've literally been at competitions where someone has shot groups for 3 ends in a row in the blue, and normally I try not to say anything because it's everyone's doing their own thing. I don't want to be that person that says tells people what to do. After 3 ends of shooting in the blue, I thought, okay, I'll just give them a hint. I was like, okay, I think you probably need to move your sight. I think the last 3 ends you've grouped left blue. And then they were like, oh yeah, that's true actually, I'll move my sight. And they went click, click, click. 3 clicks to go from the blue into the gold. And obviously the next end, their group was still in the blue. So the lesson here is know exactly how much you need to move. It is a lot more than you think, and you need to find out for you and for your sight. Different sights are different. Shibuya sight, each click moves the sight more than an axle sight, and also on the same sight, the windage, the horizontal movement, and the up and down vertical movement, the click actually moves at different amounts. So you need to calculate that both for the left and right that I just mentioned, and the up and down. But that's the first bit, is knowing how much to move your sight. The second bit is knowing when to move your sight and making sure you move it early enough. This is actually really common as well. Even if people know how much they need to move their sight, they don't quite trust where they are on the target. They think, oh, it was a bad shot, I don't need to move my sight. not all my groups there, that kind of thing. Easiest way to do this is when you go down to the target, check, am I half and half? So that's what I mean by this is basically divide the target into a quadrant, into a cross that's basically on the spider. So it's a big cross, cutting the target in half vertically and half horizontally. If your group is centered, you would expect half your arrows to be high and half of them to be low. So you check that line. When you go down to the target, are half of my arrows high and half of my arrows low? Then you do the same with the vertical line. Are half of my arrows left, half of my arrows right? That's really, really simple. Just every single end, go down to the target, check that. If it's not, then you need to move your sight. It's simple as that. Even if it's by a little bit, you need to move your sight. And because of point number 1, you know exactly how much you need to move your sight now. I've seen archers that will shoot a high 10, a high 10, 2 high 9s, 2 high 8s, and they think, oh,
the high 8s weren't great shots, so I won't move my sight.
But actually, everything is high. If they move their group down, they'd probably shoot like a 58 or something. So really important to do that. That then leads me on to the third point for this, which is then making sure you know how much each ring is worth. So what I mean by that again is in that example I gave where it was 10, 10, 9, 9, 8, 8 high, remember if you're shooting a group, because I've seen this before as well, someone shoots a group of 6 arrows all in the 9 on one side and then they don't move their sight. Remember that 9 ring is the width of the X. That's how small that ring is. It's really, really tight grouping if you shoot a group like that. Or the same goes if it's in the 8 or the 7 or whatever. If you have a group like that, that's insanely good grouping. You need to move your sight. And then the same goes for if you shoot a group of arrows, all of them are right in the red, that width of the red ring, the 8 and the 7 together, is the width of the gold. 10. So it's super easy for people to see this and think,
oh, I shot all reds, this bad end.
It's actually not, depending on how if they were everywhere, then maybe. But if they're all on one side, it's actually really, really good. So know that the 9 or one band, so from the spider to the edge of the 10, and then from the edge of the 10 to the 9, from the 9 to the 8, one band is the width of the X. That puts it into perspective, and one color is the width of the gold. So then you know now, if you're grouping consistently somewhere, you know a little bit easier whether it's reasonable to move your sight or not, and then you can use that dividing rule that I said about before as well. So when I mentioned about the width of the rings, this is really useful for aiming off as well. Because if you imagine you're trying to aim off, and you're saying, I want to aim off right blue, for example, that width is the width of the 10. So you're saying to your brain, I want to aim off in the 10, and I don't want the sight to move out of that, which is really unreasonable, and you're not going to be able to do that. So you need to be happy, and you need to know that if you're aiming off in the right blue, that actually anywhere for your sight to be in the 4, 5, 6 or 7, that is the width of the gold. Then that is actually acceptable to shoot in, and I would argue that for most people actually, when they're shooting no wind, anywhere really within the 8 or the 7 for their aiming is quite good. If there's a little bit of wobble and it's somewhere within the red and you do a good shot, it's going to be reasonable. So when you're aiming off in the blue, really maybe anywhere between the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, having a float within there, keeping your eye focus on the aiming spot, which is still the blue obviously, and doing a good shot, that will be good enough. So it will be hard to do this when you're aiming off, so that's why it's good to practice, but really good to know this about the widths of the rings, so that then you can kind of rationalize this a little bit more and not be so intent on aiming so specifically and then ruining your timing in your shot. So that's been a video on 5 ways that you can improve your scores really quickly with some work, but a lot less than some of my other technique videos. I'd love to know in the comments below if there are any extra points that you think really, really important. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.